Hi, this is Kurt, the bariatric carnivore. Why should you get your insulin levels checked? Good question. The American Diabetes Association does not recommend getting your insulin levels checked for some dang reason. Usually because it's not a standardized test. There's not been enough test over time to be able to give you a definitive marker. But you ought to get it done anyway. What happens is to too many people is they go to the doctor year after year and they've got a blood or A1C of 6.5, which they may warn you if they're really knowledgeable. That could be a problem. It looks like you're pre-diabetic. The problem is by that point, damage has already been done to your artery walls. You've been inflamed. See, what happens is when you have too much blood glucose and too much insulin, over time it's a highly inflammatory thing. It's almost like having an infection in your artery walls, and they start to get red and infected, and the epithelium starts to get cracking. And when it cracks, that's when plaques form because they're healing, and they're dangerous as heck when they're in their soft form. Because if one of those suckers pops and they almost look like a pimple on the inside of your artery wall, then that stuff gets into the bloodstream and it becomes hardened. And once it becomes hardened into your bloodstream, if it lodges in your heart, you have a heart attack. If it lodges in your brain, you have a stroke. That's the one of the effects of having this heightened insulin level over time and too much blood glucose over time. You're inflaming your system, and you start to damage the arteries down, particularly in your feet, your extremities. And that's why people get gangrene down there and they lose toes and eventually their foot and their legs if they live long enough. That's the damage that happens with type 2 diabetes. And let's not even talk about what happens to your brain, because that damage crosses the blood-brain barrier. And one of the reasons why we hear of people starting to refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes is because this is what happens over time, and you're inflaming your brain and you're causing those vital arteries and veins to get inflamed, and you're creating havoc with your brain. Then you get the placoids, then you get Alzheimer's and early onset dementia. It's dangerous stuff. It was my wake-up call. See, one of the first areas that get attacked are the very delicate veins in the back of your eyes. That's why my doctor, when I was 50, told me, well, I'm gonna have to start giving you shots in the back of your eyes because you're showing signs of macular degeneration, and if we don't do the shots, you'll eventually go blind, or at least lose most of your eyesight. That's when I asked her, oh, what do I have to do to keep that from happening? She said, you gotta lose the weight. And while at one level it's good advice, at another level it was horrible advice, because what she should have warned me about is you got metabolic syndrome and that your blood glucose is too high and you're basically pre-diabetic. But she didn't explain that. She just looked at it and said, no, you need to lose weight. And so that's why I had bariatric surgery. It didn't solve the problem, but it started moving me in the right direction. If one doctor had warned me, you've got metabolic syndrome, I would have known what to Google. I would have known what to look up. If they're not going to explain to me how in the world to make the changes, at least I would have known what to look up. But they didn't do it. Why? Because we've got this horrible psychopathic system that doesn't look after your health. They've got 5 minutes. They don't have time to explain all this stuff. I've been trying to explain it in a series of videos. I've been, there's over 60 videos where I'm trying to explain this process. They don't have time to explain it in their office. It took me a long time watching a lot of different sources, reading a whole bunch of books before I finally really understood it. So, I'm trying to point you in the right direction. You're getting your insulin level, though, checked can give you a 13 to 24 year heads up that you are heading toward type 2 diabetes. That's why you need to spend the $20 getting your insulin level tested before they tell you you're type 2 diabetic. Wouldn't you want to be able to know to stop that disease and the progression of it before it becomes a problem, before you become permanently inflamed? And you can do it with a $20 test. Why they don't do it is beyond me, but quit listening to them and start paying attention to the people that have been working on this stuff, that have been warning you about metabolic syndrome and why it's so darn dangerous. And it's preventable. See, the way you inflame your system, the way you create hyperinsulinemia is by eating constantly, particularly lots of carbs and sugar. That's what's going to cause your blood glucose to stay elevated, which means you need more insulin. Insulin's a very good hormone. It's involved in a lot of different things. But the problem with it is when it has to be released constantly by the pancreas because you're constantly eating sugary foods. You're keeping it inflamed. And over time, it collapses, it gives up. It waves the white flag of surrender and says, have your own way, you idiot. And you suddenly become a type 2 diabetic. And they tell you that, the American Diabetes Association and your doctor will tell you it's a progressive disease and you can't stop it and you're going to be taking insulin the rest of your life. And they are flat out wrong on that one. I mean, that's been proven. There's a company called Verta Health that has been helping people get off their insulin and getting out of this system by switching their diet to a low-carb diet. And when people switch to a low-carb diet and their ketone levels get high and they quit running on glucose, shazam, they don't need insulin. Their type 2 diabetes, if it isn't cured, it certainly has gone into full-scale remission and it's not a problem. Doesn't mean that the damage hasn't been done. There's still damage that can be done from years of being with your insulin levels elevated and with your blood glucose levels elevated. So why not stop it early? Why not know that you've got a problem as soon as possible? Spend the $20. If your doctor won't order you a fasting insulin test, go do it yourself. Go look online, look up blood test online. You can order it. Spend $20. You go over to a lab, they draw the blood, they run the test, they send you a level. Well, what are you looking for a level? Well, that's the problem. There's not a magic bullet that says this is the perfect number. But we know this much, lower's better. Dr. Bickman says anything below 10 is, perfectly safe. So anywhere between 2 and 10 is a pretty safe range for you to be in. If you're over 10, you probably want to start looking hard at a ketogenic low-carb diet. You want to keep that sucker down low and you want to test it regularly, particularly if you've got elevated insulin levels. It's a great warning sign. It is the flashing light on the dashboard that warns you that you need to go see a mechanic, because it really sucks when you've ignored it too long and your next call is to the auto club for a tow because you were an idiot and you missed the warning light and you ignored it for far too long. And an insulin test is your early warning light that you got a problem. Now, why should you care? So what? So I've got this elevated blood glucose level and my insulin level's too high. Well, the problem is it inflames your arteries. And when you inflame the arteries, they start to crack. And when they crack, the body goes and puts plaques in there to help cause healing. That's fine. As long as they stay intact, you're good. The problem is they often break. Too often break. And when they break, that soft plaque hits the bloodstream and becomes a hard plaque. And it moves through your bloodstream, and if it hits your heart, you have a heart attack. And if it hits your brain, you have a stroke. Heart attack being the leading cause of sudden death. The number one early warning sign that you've got heart problems is you die, or stroke, which is the number one cause of long-term disability. So the stakes are kind of high. It's not just losing your feet. It's not just losing your eyesight. It's not just Alzheimer's disease. it's early death. Them's the stakes. I keep telling you, we got a psychopathic system that is not working in your best long-term interest. If it was, they would warn you about this. Thankfully, I ran across some people like Dr. Ford Brewer, who has his own website called PrevMed, and he is a prevention medicine specialist. He used to run the program at Johns Hopkins University, and he's the one that I've listened to over the years that has really explained what this process is. And it took a long time for me to really understand it, but once I understood it, I'm just giving you the summary of it, of all the study that I've done on it. But boy, when you really understand it, you can start to reverse the dangers that go along with this. You don't have to put up with it. And frankly, it's easy to fix. All you have to do is, reduce the number of meals that you eat to maybe 2 or 3, and reduce the number of carbs. Get rid of the processed junk food that you're eating. And if you do that, you're going to lower the levels, and you're going to reduce the inflammation in your body, and you're going to be healthier. And it's, gosh, why doesn't anybody tell you that? Because there's no money in it. There's no drugs. There's nothing to sell. It requires you to just be healthy. They can't sell you anything. And you get out of the medical system, you don't have to see your doctor. You don't have to see them every couple of months for more insulin prescriptions. That's what I mean. It's just a very sick system that waits to tell you that you're type 2 diabetic until it's too darn late and the damage is done. When there's an early warning that you could do, and that is just check your fasting insulin level. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's maybe something that can save your life. If you find out about it now, you can start making the changes and keep type 2 diabetes from ever happening. So you don't have to get a wake-up call from your eye doc telling you that you're going to go blind unless she sticks needles in the back of your eyes. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. If you like this message, if you think more people ought to hear it, please hit the like and subscribe button. Join us in this journey for health, helping us get out of this sick medical system that is not looking after you. And please, if you've got type 2 diabetes, leave a comment below. Let other people know that this is not something worth putzing around with, that it really is a serious issue and it needs to be fixed as early as possible. And we'll talk to you. I try to put out a new video every single weekday, and I will talk to you soon.